Welcome to Woodbury Writes Podcast. I'm Sandy Carlson, your host, and I'm here today with Sylvia Crunden, who has been teaching for 21 years at Colebrook Consolidated School. This year, she's a first grade teacher. Sylvia holds degrees in psychology, early childhood education, and elementary education. She has volunteered as a firefighter for 13 years and is a certified EMT. She has many hobbies, including playing volleyball and softball and helping her florist friend by creating floral designs. Her books include Please Don't Pop My Bubble and Bullying is Never Okay. Welcome, Sylvia. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
As a fellow teacher who works at the other end of the public school experience or the school experience, I'm really excited to talk to a writer whose focus is on younger children. Just to see that progression and remember those times in a student's development. So would you tell us about yourself as a writer?
So I have been, as you had said, I've been teaching for 21 years at the same school, which is very exciting. It's a small school in Colebrook, which I grew up in a small school. So that's very nice. I always just wanted to write a book. It's funny when I think about myself as an author, because I think of myself as a teacher, but I always wanted to write a book and never really had the idea of what to write about. But as I've been teaching, noticing that there are some deficits in some books for kids in elementary, or looking for a resource such as in the social skills to teach the kids in first grade, kindergarten. Again, I do concentrate up to about fourth grade for most of my books because I do tier them for different things. Like I said, just kind of wanted to write a book. My nephews were a big inspiration on the Please Don't Pop My Bubble. Spend a lot of time with them. And then, of course, the students that I teach. So personal space is a huge issue with elementary kids. And a lot of people don't believe it, but I actually wrote that book before COVID. And then I pushed it out pretty quickly so that it would be out for COVID because, of course, we had a lot of spacing then, and now we do, and before we do. So it really just helps the kids having a visual. And there was only a couple books that I would read to the kids. There are a lot of bullying books, which is great, but it was just another subject that I kind of wanted to talk about and kind of put my own spin and what I wanted the kids to actually have in my classroom.
Sure. So how do first graders understand the concept of personal space?
Well, that was one reason why I kind of came up with a concept of writing a book for personal space, because they really don't get it. They're on top of each other. They just don't understand. They really need a visual. A lot of times in my classroom, I have spots, or if they sit on the carpet, so they have their own personal space. But when they're in like line, that's always a big one. So that's why when I thought about writing the book that, I had the different scenarios, them being in the line, them sitting next to each other so that they would know how to try to solve it themselves without a teacher saying, you're on top of so-and-so, and, it's difficult. So that's the subject that I came up with first. It really came very quickly for me.
Does having the book help kids move away from being in trouble for doing something wrong by getting too close to somebody versus being led into an understanding with a visual that they find appealing and a story that's understandable?
You definitely hear them saying the phrase. The kindergarten teacher at my school and I both use the phrase a lot. And now the kids tend to use the phrase, "Oh, you're in my bubble," or "You're popping my bubble" from the book, which is really good. So I think it gives them also something to say besides just the visual, because a lot of times the kids will yell, "Hey, you're in front of me," instead of saying, "Excuse me," or like I said, using the phrases from the book. "You're in my bubble, you're popping my bubble," and I'll use it. I'll be like, "Oh, you're in my personal space, you just popped my bubble." So I model for them as well. But they definitely, and I've heard from other teachers that use the book that their kids use the phrase as well.
I think it's a great phrase, and I grew up hearing it from my mom, and it had to do with making somebody unhappy by disturbing them, don't burst your bubble, don't burst, so it carries that, because if people are in your space, they're making you unhappy and uncomfortable.
Right. And I tried to portray that in the books, the feelings in their body and how to express that besides just yelling. And some kids don't mind if other people are in their space, and some kids it really bothers. So it all depends on the kid as well.
Your 21 years of teaching experience probably did a lot to inform your writing for sure. What other books kind of influenced you as a writer for children?
Well, there's a couple different ones. Of course, I have my favorite that I always tell the kids, Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree. It's a classic. Everybody likes it, but I just really like how he portrays, delivering the way he delivers the message, and how for him in the book, it's about being happy, but how he goes about writing it and he writes in a different way. And then there's another book by Howard Binkow. He writes a lot of them. They're Howard Wigglebottom. There's Learns to Listen. There's Bullying. He has a ton of them. But I just really like how he structures his story and kind of just brings it to the kids' level of what they're going through. So when I was writing, I was also trying to think of, oh, well, how are the kids seeing this, getting their perspective, but also having the teacher's perspective. And I did use quite a few people when I was writing. I used my sister as a parent. So, could you read this as a parent? How do you feel that this would work at home? Because I don't feel that the books are just for school and for teachers. They're also for parents, counselors, whoever's dealing with the issue, to help the children. And so I kind of got different perspective. I got the kindergarten teacher's perspective. I got the psychologist's perspective, because I can write it how I see it, but I wanted to get different points of view into it as well. And I feel like Howard Binkow does that.
I think there's nothing that can replace lived experience as the raw material for a text. And as you're speaking, you're making me think of the great Margaret Wise Brown, author of Hello Moon, who was an entrepreneur and a prolific writer. And when writers had a story idea for her, they had to read them to kids. They had to read their ideas to the kids, and the kids were the first readers of that text. And if it flopped with them, back to the drawing board. She didn't want to know about it. So there's a lot to be said for understanding the point of view of your young audience and incorporating that understanding into what you're writing. So that is terrific. And it's not relevant to the writing of this book, but just you as a human being, what do you like to read? What satisfies your need for story when you're not in the classroom or writing a children's book?
James Patterson is definitely my favorite author. I read a lot of his. I like a couple of his series. I like his philosophy of writing what makes you happy. And he does series, which of course I wanted to do some series, but I just liked how he's so passionate about his writing. I know he does write with other people as well, which I think collaborative is great, but just writing what makes you happy and what you feel is going to be maybe a resource for someone or just a great idea.
And I just back to your writing. I've been to your website and checked out the books and just to become more informed about you as a writer. And I see you've sold more than 1,000 books. Could you give us a time frame? How long have you been involved in writing for kids?
Really since 2000. So it's only been, we've just approached our third year. I'm kind of debating on writing a third book. I have a couple ideas. Being self-published, as you know, is very difficult. It's a long process and it's a lot of work as on top of teaching and the rest of our lives, but we do enjoy it as writers. I had a lot of great supporters, family, friends. The first book, I think like almost everybody I knew probably bought it, and other teachers bought it and schools. So I've also done some fairs and gone to some schools to promote it. And although I would like to make a lot of money in this to be my living, it's very hard. We all know that. But I'm more in it for the resource for students and parents and teachers, being that I was looking for a book, I know there's other teachers looking for ideas. And kind of to go back on what you were saying before, how, some authors will read it to kids first. My second book, I was actually working on, I think it was 2021. And as I was writing it, I teach series books. So this is great, right? They all want to hear my books. It's great. It's wonderful just seeing them read it after I've read it to them. And so I was working on it. I said, so I kind of used my bullying book as I was writing, and they're writing series books, so they could actually see that this is something that you do. So, and they're like, oh, this is a good idea. So I would read a part of it to them. And, if it, like you said, if it didn't go over well, then I changed it a little bit. If it did, then I felt good about it. So, and, of course, reading it to kids is wonderful. And actually, the year we had COVID in 2020, it would have been the fall, I did the read aloud. So I read for my book we're a K through 6 school to each grade.
That's great. And it's also modeling for kids the value of writing and having an authentic audience. And you said a couple times how satisfying it is to read to kids and to see them engage the text, which is tremendous.
Yeah.
I it'll probably stay with them forever, the value of writing when you see there's a story worth telling, so that is so significant. And I'm wondering, you've been a classroom teacher in the same school for 21 years, and you've taught the elementary grades. Could you just speak to the importance of place and how has place changed very much over the past 2 decades in your career as kids? Are the needs different? Are the responses to texts different, or are kids kids?
Well, to some extent, I think kids are kids. I remember when I first started in kindergarten. I did 13 years in kindergarten, so that was a long time, but I was ready for the change. I really enjoy first grade because that's where they're really starting to read, and I feel that's where you see a great jump. I know you see great jumps in other grades as well, but as far as actually them reading, you do see the academics have changed a little bit more. Some of the needs for the kids, such as the bullying, now there's cyberbullying. I'm glad I don't have to deal with that, in first grade, but it's definitely changed. I seem to recall a lot of the issues when I started teaching was like speech and occupational therapy. And now there is a lot more educational needs, such as helping with learning how to read or social emotional. And then, as we all talked about, when COVID hit, there was less socialization. So now a lot of the kids are learning how to socialize again. So I think those topics are needed to be taught, because it's not as natural. When some of these kids didn't go to daycare or preschool, so they're coming in without that social aspect.
I hear you. I teach at the high school level, and you get the kids that are watching the clock when it's about the last bell of the day, and yet they came back with an appreciation of what was taken from them,
Yeah.
And I get sort of teary-eyed when I think of what is public education, school, what we believe in and what we value as a society for our youngest members, to ensure their safety, that they're fed, that they're safe, that they have good stories to read. It's a measure for me as an English teacher that taxpayers are still buying novels for people, and I say to my kids, people working hard outside this building gave the town money to buy books for you to read. These stories are important. And for teachers to bring their creativity and their passion for their kids into the conversation by generating books, as you have, is what makes me an optimistic person as a member of this community, Connecticut, the United States, that we do this. And it's important, and there are more stories to come. And while there are the James Pattersons of the world that occupy multiple shelves in every library across the country, there is room and there is a need for this kind of literature that responds to the needs we see right in front of us, and that we take the time and will produce those books is huge. It's huge.
I totally agree with you, because like I said, the reason why I came up with the first topic was because when I was teaching, I'm like, I need this resource. There's a couple of good books, but it's not what I want. I mean, the kids kind of need this. So when I, they need the phrase or whatever it is, or giving the visual. So it is very important. And there are a lot of good writers out there writing great things. And I am very happy and very lucky that I am in a school system that values reading, writing, all academics, social skills. I'm in a great district. My classroom is full of books. I have my whole back shelf is books that they can read. I have leveled books for them. Anytime I need books, I can go to the PTO. They are so supportive in fundraising, the school, and it is difficult with funding and budgeting and stuff like that. But it is great to have districts that value reading and books, and that, kids be literate and enjoy what they're reading, and also enjoy writing as well, because they are our future. So hopefully they'll be the writers, and it's good for them to see that.
So well said. Would you, Sylvia, would you mind reading from your book for us, just so we can hear your voice and kind of have the experience?
Because we were talking a lot about my first book, which is Please Don't Pop My Bubble. I think I'll read a little bit it's kind of in the middle of the book, where the teacher is, discovering that the kids are having an issue, and it gives a nice visual of the bubbles. And it says, when we are in someone else's space, a person can make you feel uncomfortable or crowded. If someone is in your space, your body may feel different, like you have a stomach ache or your heart is beating faster. You may also feel different emotions, such as upset or angry. Class, we need to stay in our own space, or what I call your bubble. When someone gets into someone else's bubble, we pop it. And no one wants a popped bubble. When someone is in your space, you can ask them to please get out of your bubble. When someone is putting their hands on you, you can tell them they are popping your bubble. Ask them to please stay in your own space. Please don't pop my bubble. So that was kind of one of the spots that I like in there.
That's great. And that's great to have something that you can say that cues everything the other person needs to know and keeps everything friendly, and the show stays on the road.
Right.
So as a high school teacher, I see that as civil discourse. Here's how we navigate this space we share, and we were all little kids for a while with the stickers on the floor in the supermarket telling us where to stand. And
right. And I also like the kids to become independent and be able to do it on their own, because eventually I tell them, I'm not going home with you. I may not be in the hallway with you. So you need to try to learn how to solve the problems. And the same thing in the bullying book. I thought a lot about that with, getting all the aspects in, the physical, the verbal, but also empowering the kids to say, either whether it's the bystander, that's the friend, you're bullying this person, don't do that. And then also empower the kid that's being bullied to say, hey, you're being mean, you're bullying me, you drew this every day, this is not okay. And also with that, I've talked to a lot of people, because some people say, well, some of the kids get confused with bullying and being mean, and there is a difference. But again, kind of getting that it happens more than 3 times. It's verbal, it could be physical, just so that they understand the concept of bullying, and that you don't always have to get the teacher. You can empower yourself, but yes, there are times you need an adult as well.
Yeah, that is so important to recognize that you do have the power to nip something in the bud right away, versus letting it become something else, or and try to preserve the relationship.
And that's part of it. In the books, it's Nick and Ben, which are actually my nephews. So they're brothers, but they're best friends in the story in different spots, especially in Pop My Bubble. He's like, well, he's my friend, so I don't want to hurt his feelings, but yeah, I'm uncomfortable. So it's also teaching them, you don't have to be uncomfortable because somebody else is doing something. You need to empower, stand up for yourself, not in a mean way, but in a way that is acceptable, and say, hey, and in the bullying one, also say, like, sometimes bullies don't know they're bullying, or they're doing it for attention, or there's other reasons.
You're teaching critical life skills through stories, and that is so vital to our future, as you said, Sylvia. If people want to find your books, they can find them on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and they can also check out your website, right?
Sure. It's www.sylviacrunden, SylviaCrunden.com. I do a bundle, so you can do one of each book, two of each book, for a little bit of a deal.
Your website is beautiful and gives a good sense of the book, and the illustrations, and they're gorgeous. Thank you so much today for your time, Sylvia, talking about your books for little kids. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me on the podcast and getting the word out.
Thanks. It's great to be in it together.
Yes, it is.